I would love for us to take a minute to put the issues aside and maybe take a minute and see our children for who they maybe really are, okay? And to see our children or our child for who they are in their innate strengths, their innate abilities, their innate passions, their innate interests. And see if we can just enjoy that type of framing out of this presentation, because the truth is, that's going to be their story for the rest of their life. They're going to build a career, they're going to build a life based on their strengths, interests, and passions. Yes, they have to build their weaknesses. Yes, they have to overcome struggles. Yes, they have to face adversity. But ideally, it's in the pursuit of who they want to be based on their strengths, interests. We're all functioning adults here. Like, we look back at our past and we look back, oh yeah, that was kind of how I got here. Ideally. So we want to see that same frame of mind with our children and help them walk that path. So when you see your child in 10 years from now, what do you see, right? As you see the vision for who they are 10 years from now. Again, if they're middle school, that's a different 10 years than if they're in high school. If they're a senior in high school, that might be really different than if they're a freshman in high school. But imagine that. And then think about, what are your fears? When I picture that journey from where my child is today to them, right? Because if we think about the fears today, we want to start, because what we're afraid of is going to drive the bus of our parenting if we let it. Okay? So we want to try of course, we're all parents here, so like, none of this is easy. I'm just saying, we got to acknowledge that, because if we don't work with that or through that, we're going to see our children becoming what we are afraid of. And that's what we want to hold ourselves accountable to as parents, right? And then say, okay, as I acknowledge what I'm afraid of, how do I continue to embrace and challenge myself as a parent to put my fears away and start to foster within my child their own journey, right? Because here's the truth. We don't need to remind our kids what they suck at. Right? They already know. And I'll tell you, if their friends haven't told them yet, because there's nobody more honest than a teenage boy or girl in the middle of the class, being like, why all these complaints about what they might be struggling with. So they already know. And we don't need to remind them anymore. So we can maybe check ourselves, be like, okay, what is my game plan as a parent to monitor myself as we work through this? Okay, so I'm trying to frame this out because it is about homework battles, but really it's about who's doing the battling, whose battle is it, and how do we change the story of our parenting to help build our kids up, right? Focusing on their strengths, their interests, their passions, while at the same time helping them to see who they're meant to be. So we want to stop, the other word for this is nagging, right? So what is nagging? Nagging is just a way of framing out our fears and how it interacts with our kids day in and day out, right? What do we complain about is usually what we're concerned about, right? What we're concerned about is usually a framework of what we're afraid of or what we're anxious about or what we're worried about. All those are all the same type of terms, right? They're all synonyms. So we want to get out of the role of being the driver of their life. We want to get out of the driver's seat, and we want to move into the passenger seat. This whole presentation, you'll see elements of a road throughout the presentation, symbolizing who's doing the driving. And when we're doing the nagging, we're doing the driving, right? If we're doing so we want to start to shift that within ourselves to say, okay, how do I meet my child where they are so that I can help them to help themselves? You're like, yeah, that sounds good. I know. At the point, you're not here to get easy answers. And by the way, if you have a rebel child, this is even harder. because a rebel personality is a tough personality, because some of us in this room might be a rebel personality. You're not always. Oh, by the way, this is Gretchen Rubin's. It's really cool. It's a really cool quiz. You can do it for yourself. You can do it for your husband. You can do it for your spouse, or you can do it for your kids, and just kind of see if they are a rebel. They might have a tendency that falls into a couple different camps. It's just a way of just reflecting on what is a rebel tendency. Oh, they don't like authority. Oh, they don't like people telling them what to do. Oh, that's everything I'm doing. And so you start to shift maybe through this type of quiz. It just gives you awareness into that type of personality and what to do with it. All right?
So just to interrupt. So on our phone,
oh,
right now, we can just click that.
Yes.
And it'll lead us to it. There's
try
no firewall or anything.
Give me someone in the room who wants to click and see what happens.
Awesome.
Cool.
That's great.
I forgot to put I have a finger that's supposed to be right here, and the finger's not missing, so I think we'll show later. But yes. So ideally it's interactive, so people can just click on stuff and go through it later. But this isn't. I've had teenagers do this quiz because it builds self-awareness. Do you know you're a rebel? No. Ah, yeah, you're definitely a rebel. It's the best personality type. It's just really hard. But the rebel's the one that blazes trails, creates things, and then lets everybody else clean up the mess, right? But until then, it's really hard to parent a rebel, and it's also hard to be a rebel as a teenager because you kind of get in your own way, right? You kind of have to fail forward a lot and learn from your own mistakes. But let's get back to homework battles. Why do we care about the homework battles? Like, why is it such a big deal? Well, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. Homework is a preparation for life. Okay, I'm a teacher. I don't really think that way every time I'm in the classroom because I don't go home with the students and their homework. But I do know as a teacher that homework has a value to it in building skills and knowledge, depending on what the content is, but it builds skills. And some kids aren't really ready for those skills, and we'll get into that in a minute. But homework is a preparation for but it has real-world implications. And we know that as fully functioning adults. And we see our kids really dropping the ball on some of those entry skills. And we're like, crap, my kid's not going to make it. So that's why it becomes such a big deal. Because it kind of is. But at the same time, we have to understand that the struggle is real, right? It is a real struggle because honestly, no kid wants to fail. They don't set out to fail. They don't say, how many times can I suck today? And how many things can I get wrong? How many missed assignments can I get? How many times can I get yelled at by my parents? And how many times can I get yelled at? That's not their game plan, right? So the struggle is real, and there's various things that we just want to understand are going on. There may be a developmental delay. And we think, if I asked you to say anything, what age developmentally is your child? That's a good question. Well, you have social age. You have cognitive age, just in terms of you have emotional age. Like emotionally, oh yeah, my kid's 16, but he's a pup, right? He can't really handle stuff more than a 12-year-old, right? So you start to think about developmentally, where is my child? And are the expectations much higher than they developmentally can handle? Yes or no? And then you try being in their shoes, covering that gap. And that might be true, but it's worth acknowledging if it is, because now you have to think twice about how do I meet them where they are versus pretend that they're really 12 when they're actually 9. Well, that's a staggering difference. But like you all know, you hear the term executive functions. I do lectures to teachers on executive functions. There are like 30 different categories of executive functions. It just depends on what theoretical professor you're asking, what book you read. So I like the Harvard study. They out of Harvard University, they capture 3 cognitive-based profiles on executive functions. And it's good to understand. You have working memory. Inhibitory control is just really the ability to handle impulse. And then cognitive flexibility is the ability to shift between preferred, non-preferred, rigid thinking. You ever heard of that? Like my kids just kind of get stuck in their own thinking and they just are so rigid. That would be a cognitive flexibility challenge or inflexibility. And then there's other ways to frame out executive dysfunction. If you're smart and scattered, that it's been around for quite a while, and they talk about the thinking skills and the doing skills. All of these fall under these executive functions. But the truth is I don't always start with executive functions. I go to self-regulation skills because self-regulation skills come first. My ability to regulate myself in monitoring my own thoughts, judging my own behavior. Was that a good behavior or bad behavior? Where am I going? And then reacting to my own decisions. What am I thinking? How am I feeling? These are like, self-regulation types of skills. The child that comes home and has a meltdown most days is struggling with coping skills. When their working memory is at its lowest and their anxiety and stress is at its highest, you see self-dysregulation, right? And just lagging skills around how to cope with that overwhelming time in school and then coming home and just blowing up or melting down in front of mom, the safety zone of their life, right? And then, but then there's other skills. We're coming out of COVID, and so many parents are talking about post-COVID. There's these lagging skills around academics, active learning, I call them, because for 2 years they sat passively and looked at a screen. And now they come out of that, and for many of them, it's not a quick fix to get them back on track. So it takes deliberate and conscientious time to build those skills and teach teach how to learn as an active process. And then there's my favorite topic, and this is lagging, we call metacognitive skills. It's the process of thinking about my own thinking. We see that as problem-solving challenges. The issues keep showing up, and my son or daughter keeps making the same mistakes over and over, as if they can't solve them. And the truth is they can't. They don't have the skills to build effective solutions that are interventions to their own problems. Like, I forgot. How many times does your child say, I forgot? I forgot, right? And I forgot just becomes a truth statement around what I didn't do or what I chronically didn't do. But to solve that problem requires a way of monitoring myself and problem solving issues in my life, right? And I'll say this gets a little bigger because I'm going to show you how to kind of work through this, is if I'm having a hard time solving problems in my life, it's not really the problems I'm having a time solving. It's I don't really know where I'm going, and I don't really know how to get there. So when things fall apart along the way, I don't really know how to solve the things that fall apart along the way. I don't have any processes. I don't have any schedules. I don't have any clear expectations and lines that guide me on my path. So when I do come off track and there's a problem like I forgot to submit my homework, or it's 11 o'clock at night because I started my homework at 10, right? These are big problems that I'm really struggling to solve because I don't really have processes in place that make it easy to solve problems. So we want to help them build that. So I'm going to pause here. I've just said a lot. I know I said I have a lot to say. It's not nearly as helpful if it's not helpful, right? So I kind of just talked about a little bit of a framework around what the lagging skills might be, right? Why this might be really hard, why it might be hard to manage an expectation like homework, and why developmentally they may not be ready to handle those after taking on the burden of school all day. And now they have to put their hat back on and get back into it at 6 o'clock at night. what? I was just there all day. Like, that took a lot. Now you want me to do more? Like, forget it. Forget it. And so what do you do about that? Well, again, nobody sets up to fail. You can't talk to the school and say, don't give my kid homework, because because it's hard to then change the system to meet your child. But you can modify, you can work with teachers, you can get supports in place, you can do all of that. At the end of the day, if that homework is related to tomorrow's assignment, your child suffers. Most of the time, homework isn't really just busy work these days. Used to be. Used to be a lot of busy work. Now it's, most of the time, it's pretty relevant to what's happening tomorrow in practicing. So what do? Well, to build these skills, we have to then say, okay, as I pull back on my nagging, as I say to myself, okay, I'm going to get out of the driver's seat of my child's life, try to, right? I would say if you don't know where to start with the priorities, and I'll get into what that looks like, the ADLs of life. But if I get out of the driver's seat and I put my child in the driver's seat and I start teaching them what their life looks like, right? What might that do for them? Well, it might give them a roadmap to follow, right? It might start to help them foster within themselves their identity around what my life looks like. Now, this is, who has an elementary, middle school kid? All right, cool. Who has a high school kid? I think you might be past you. I'm just kidding. But I tell you, the high school, they really want nothing to do with their parents. Elementary school, you're still kind of there if they still think you're a hero. But the truth is we have ultimate control over giving our children a framework of how to see the world, because we're their lifeline, right? As soon as we give them a phone, we change that, right? So that's okay. We just got to acknowledge that. So if we give them a strong foundation before that, a strong foundation, and that foundation is really important because that foundation helps with their self-regulation. And that foundation is built on family priorities, expectations, right? These big words, obligations, and, let's see one word. Expectation. I say expectations?
Yeah.
Responsibilities, thank you. And responsibilities. Right? That's the foundation of their house. You own the house. They live with you. That is something that's very important. Now, if there's cracks in that foundation, because they're confused, they're not sure, that's something we are empowered to say, oh, I gotta fix that. Right? And we can do this. We can do this by embracing them in that process and coming up with nice, clear expectations that help them to help themselves, right? And bringing them as part of the process allows them to buy into who they're trying to be as it relates to being, David Murphy's son, right? Because my son still really enjoys hanging out with me. I mean, he's only 8 right now. He's 9. My 14-year-old, she's done. There's nothing else I can do for that, right? It either worked or it didn't work. But we spent a lot of time talking about being a Murphy. Because that's his identity. His identity is being Dad's son. So we talk about what it means to be a Murphy. Yep. So there's language that we can use in that process. Even if I'm struggling with homework, that's okay. As long as I'm still living out the values of being a Murphy. Am I trying? Whatever. Like you're always evaluating that. And you put things in writing. Because unfortunately, you have to be louder than TikTok. Right? You have to be louder than social media. And to be louder, I have to put things in front of my child and always be talking about what our values are. Again, this is kind of all I care about right now, is helping to build a foundation, a roadmap for my child. Oh, you can't see my road. There's my road right there. Right? So it grounds them. It brings order to their chaos of their thinking. Now, if they have ADHD, that's a good thing because their thoughts are all over the place and they don't have the skills to organize them yet. Right? Now, you can yell at them, you can nag, but that's reactive. I'm just saying this presentation is all about being proactive. I want you working less so that your children are working more. But it does take a little bit of upfront lifting to help ground them into who they need, who you see them being, so that they can see themselves a little easier.
And so what would you call this? Is this like a contract with your kids? Like, it looks like you sign it and post it in.
Yeah, so there's different things you can call it. Family expectations, right? There's no, I mean, you can say rules, but I'm a fan of expectations until you need to get to rules, right? I mean, there's rules, and then there's like expectations. Like it's softer, and you can have conversations around this, where your child is part of writing it. Most kids aren't going to argue chores. They understand the value of it. Now, whether they want to do it in the moment is a different story, but they all understand the value of certain things as part of a family. It's just you put that in writing, it becomes more concrete. We talk about logic. The emotion versus logic. When things are in writing, there's more of a logical anchoring of that in my thinking. I see it now. It's real. And that's important. That's a good question. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Who's tried this? How'd it go? No, just kidding. Okay, now this is like proactive parenting 101. But you only need to do this stuff when you start to realize your kid's kind of struggling to just go with the flow. Do you ever see the ducks as they kind of like go through the water and there's one duck that's kind of stuck in the weeds on the side and you're like, is that duck going to catch up? And eventually it just kind of catches up to the back of the pack and it gets there, right? And then there's sometimes where you're like, my kid's just off in no man's land, like not really following my implicit expectations. Okay, that's okay. You have to just now say, okay, I have to make them explicit. I have to put these expectations in front of them verbally and non-verbally. Don't just say it. Our children struggle with the language of consequences and the language of expectations. It's not their game. You put it in writing and you either put visuals to go with it. Do you see how visuals for us up here? Right? This is helpful, right? Visuals are good. It's called non-verbal communication. All right? When you do this, it tells your child what? Be quiet. Be quiet, right? If I say be quiet, which one do you think is more effective? So nonverbal is a really powerful strategy when working with dysregulated kids that might have lagging skills. So don't treat them like a 12-year-old. They're not there yet. And by the way, if 1, 2, 3 timeout was working when they were when they were in first, second grade, and now they're in fourth, and you put that in the shelf, take it back out. Okay? Because that type of parenting strategy still works, especially for kids that have these developmental delays in maturity. Don't treat them like a middle schooler that can handle different parenting style when they still would benefit from some of those elementary strategies you used back when they were in elementary school. You can click on this. Huge fan. I haven't even gotten my son's friends to agree to it yet, so I'm not winning this battle, but I'm a huge fan. I think collectively, if parents just band together and said, why are we making our lives so difficult? I have 9-year-olds that got like the, the phone watch, iPhone watch or something. And they were going to school with it. 4 of them. My son's like, Dad, I really want one of those watches. I emailed the teacher. I said, I'm sorry on behalf of all the parents that are crazy enough to send their kid to school with that technology and to think that's helpful. That's just so not helpful, right? And so we have to think about what are we doing to exacerbate the problem, I think, and just decide, I want my job to be easier as a parent, right? So, no screens during the week. That doesn't go well. at all. But when you're dealing with screen issues, no better way to handle it than to create a boundary that keeps it nice and safe and predictable, right? So boundaries are really helpful. We want boundaries. And we have to sometimes draw a hard line as parents to say, this is a non-negotiable boundaries. But then other times we create proactive boundaries. Oh, Sunday night family huddle. Game changing. Who doesn't?
Love it.
It's game changing, right?
It's good.
It's
good.
and it
But,
probably
you
took
know,
some time,
Yeah.
right? But
A lot
eventually,
of eye rolling.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
God, Mom.
but eventually, and maybe you do it as a family, and maybe you're doing it individually, but either way, it's a powerful strategy to allow you to address issues that you know are going to come up. Why we already know what the problems are. My kid can't do this, right? So then you just forecast those, and you develop, you help your child develop planning strategies, problem-solving strategies, called future planning strategies, to fend against potential problems.
I think it's hard with this. I like it, but I found I could never make the leap for me being their executive functioner. I feel like I was constantly like pointing out what was going to happen, and this is what, and they never really took it over.
Yeah.
And then they got older, and then they're like, they won't. I mean, I could lucky if I could get them to the table.
Right.
Get them early.
Right. The benefits, yes. Starting early, then you're like, yeah, it's too late. But it's really about having one-to-one interactions to allow there to be a conversation or interventions. Even if you are spoon feeding certain topics with your kids to help them plan for the week, that's still proactive. And it prevents you from having to be reactive when you know those problems are going to come up, or you're trying to say, okay, these are some of the challenges that we hit on last week. I want to talk about them. Sometimes I say, if you want to look at the grades, you do that once a week, and you sit down and you look at things on once a week, Sunday night. How did it go? If you want to do anything on a daily basis in terms of boundaries, you have a check-in once a day. That's our game plan. That's our expectation. Is you and I are checking in once a day. It can be at the start of your homework time, or it can be at the end of it, or it could be both, to evaluate how we're doing today. Are we ready to finish our day? Right? What help do you need from me? Because I'm here. And then when you think about the week, oh, we have sports, we have this. We have to figure out, you have to help me decide when you're going to do your homework this week. What looks good? Here's the schedule, mapped it out on a planner. I have the best planners, academic planners in the world. I have a couple examples over there, and I'll show you one up here, where you can map out the life of a student athlete. It allows you to see both on one view. It's a really, really awesome tool. It's the only one I recommend. But to be able to do that once and then see the week allows you to build something called temporal awareness, stretching the temporal horizon to see into the future. It's a great skill. I wouldn't say, even if it felt like it wasn't working all the time, just doing that 100 times is doing something with your kids, even if you're the one leading that conversation most of the time. It's worth a return on that, especially when you think about what will happen if you just didn't and you just dealt with issues throughout the week, right? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Now you can forecast it. Oh, sorry, back up. You probably, I don't know if this is the first time you're seeing Failing Forward. I'm a huge believer in the language of resilience, the language of grit, the language of perseverance. Failing forward is just my way of saying, you're gonna fail. It's what we do with our failures that determine our success. So celebrating failures as part of a mission statement gives all of our children a chance to face the truth. And that life's not perfect. You're never gonna be perfect. You're always gonna be hitting stumbling blocks and obstacles in life. As a family, we're just gonna celebrate them and learn through them together. So you don't feel like you're doing it all on your own. And then when you do, and then you don't beat yourself up, because that can happen. Kids strive for this perfectionist type, like everything needs to be perfect. No, life's not perfect. Life's not supposed to be easy. Hope your kids realize that. We all know that. Life's not supposed to be easy. We're supposed to bring meaning to life. By bringing meaning to life, we make it easier, right? By bringing purpose to life, strengths, interests, we make it easier, right? And then we start bringing, and then obviously there's other ways of building that type of resilience to see, oh, the journey of life isn't as hard because I've built the strengths to handle it. What do you guys call the things that steal your kids' time? You have words for it? Yeah, time suckers. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I use time robbers. It's good to have a word for it and just label it throughout in the house. You know, right? Who uses the word strategies in your house? It's a good word to use because we want to teach our kids that you're always working on strategies to manage life. So what is your strategy to manage the time robbers that are sucking your time, stealing your time, as the time robber analogy would go, right? And not helping you be the best version of yourself. What are you doing? Right? And you can promote that conversation all the time with your children as you see them getting stuck and things like that. But this is a proactive decision. What are your time robbers? What's our plan to handle them? Raising your hand if your child struggles with being consistent. All right. So again, from a strategy standpoint, what are the tools? What are the ways we help build consistency in our life? Right. Teaching what consistency looks and feels like. It's an excellent language to promote in our house. Now, they may watch us get up for work every day, and they watch us have our own consistency, which, by the way, your children will always do what you do before they do what you say. Okay? So if you're doing all the things you've been nagging about, meaning you're living the life you expect your children to live, they're going to get there. Because they eventually, you look at your own parents, right? Look at you guys, right? Look at us. Man, I'm so much like my dad. Damn it. Right? We eventually emulate the habits that we've watched with our parents. So that's good news, right? Right? Conscientious parenting, we're doing a good job, right? With loving house. So they eventually get that stuff and they eventually follow it. In the meantime, they should know what consistency looks and feels like. Right? They should follow their own morning schedule. How's that going? Sometimes good, sometimes bad, right? But that's a big goal. As you heard me say, homework battles, in our kind of where I work, homework battles do not replace life skills. Okay? Because homework battles come second to the foundation of life skills, just the ADLs of life, being able to move throughout my day, handling activities of daily living is significant, right? Most middle school kids that struggle to get up in the morning, they leave for school feeling more stressed and overwhelmed and less connected to their self-identity because they needed help as if they were at a certain age that they don't want to be, right? It's like they needed the help of a first or second grader when they're like in middle school. So part of the journey for them is that's emotional for them. They don't want that. They don't want to fail in the mornings. So it is a meaningful topic to tackle. But how do you tackle it if you have 3 or 4 children, right? You try to be conscientious about it and realize that my child's morning routine is their first stepping stone into the day and the first evidence of their ownership of who they're trying to be. It sets the tone for the rest of the day. So I always say, if you want to start anywhere, start in the morning. You're like, the kid doesn't sleep well. Okay, well then definitely want to start with a good night's sleep. And then tackle the morning. Okay? These are, I'm going to scaffold some examples here. Some children don't need it written down. They just need mom and dad to get out of the way so they can fall on their face a few times, meaning go to school late, get 6 detentions, and then they figure it out. Others, they really need it more scripted and they need this in front of them. Okay? You just know your kid, you're like, oh, David made sense. I got to stop nagging them in the morning. Okay, makes sense. I heard him. but may need to go a step further, right? Some of us may need to go a step further and really build it out. This looks much louder than it really should be, but like, this is a big screen. But to have this posted in certain parts of the house, right? So they are checking off and monitoring their own progress. Some may need to go a step further. And this is what we call as a link between nonverbal working memory and the language that goes with it. But many of our children that do have have profound dysregulation or executive function challenges, they don't have really well-developed nonverbal work skills. They don't see pictures of their own identity. Like if I said, close your eyes and imagine yourself brushing your teeth. A lot of us can do that. But some of our children that have these types of dysregulation, they can't really do that real well. They can't picture what their life looks like. Okay, now it's hard to imagine. But if I can't picture what I want to be, I can't see who I'm trying to be, then my emotion is not attached to anything. And that's how we really develop our own self-motivation, is we see ourselves in shape. We see ourselves acting. We see these pictures in our minds of what we're trying to accomplish in our life. Our kids may not see that. So this is one way in the course of just independent skills, right? Of helping them see that. They go around, they take a picture of themselves brushing their teeth. They go around, they take my backpack on, I'm ready for my day, I'm at the door, and I'm ready to leave. That's right there. Ready to go. This was transformative, by the way. She couldn't make it to school. It was an absolute tornado every morning of emotional and physical just overwhelm. But by helping her to help herself and develop something like this, she was able to build her own success story on what's working. And I said, just focus on what's working. Don't. If there's a bad day, let it go. Start again the next day. Over time, start to build something. Okay, so again, I'm scaffolding it. Was that any questions about that? Yes.
So how, so I have a middle schooler and I feel as though she needs like that detail.
Sure.
Our mornings are a disaster, but it's kind of like a fight, like you kind of touched upon this. They want to be treated like the age they are, even though it seems like she's not really capable of doing those things. So I feel like she often is like, you're treating me like a little kid, like a baby. How come I all do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So just for example, Samantha was very involved in the making of this.
Yeah.
No one made this and handed it to her.
Okay.
So for kids that want to be independent, do whatever you can to make them part of the process.
Yeah.
To nurture their independence, because without that, they have a mom that's telling them there's all this negative stuff anyways. So that's the best way to spin that. Right? And I honestly, like what she came up with was basically what mom was hoping anyways. So it's not like she didn't, it was just, I think she had something flipped. But we talked about upstairs and downstairs. Do you know how many kids run up and down the stairs like 6 times? But that's part of the inability to see who I'm trying to be. It's like, oh, you mean I can get everything done upstairs and then go downstairs? Yes. Let me show you how. And so you build that out, and all of a sudden you start to see them shifting in their own cognitive understanding, cognitive awareness of that relationship. Mornings become a little better, right? I mean, you could add in here. I mean, you can add into this because these are very personalized examples. But if there's medication concerns, like you want to start building independence with taking their own medication, you can build that in. Especially if a kid's going off, you want them to go to college and they can't handle taking medication. That's like primary needs. I have to handle it, work that out, right? Yeah.
This might sound really obvious, but one of the best things I did was start my kids young using alarm clocks, where they would just, instead of me waking them up and like, you have to get up, an alarm clock, and then they have to get up, was pretty remarkable for us. I'm like second grade, like young, first grade, second grade, their own alarm clock, an old-fashioned plug-in alarm clock.
I say even to like this example, the best success stories are when for our kiddos that hate planners. Hindsight's always 20/20, but if you could instill a value within our children of practicing the process of seeing who they're trying to be on paper at a young age, then when they get to middle school and it's really necessary, and they get to high school and it's really necessary, they have the internal processes established already, and they don't really fight it. When they get to middle school and high school, like in the law, they just fight it. And I hear all these people say, "What if my kid refuses to use a planner?" Well, that's probably because we just paired it with all this complaining and that. Like, we made it feel like this was such a negative thing about themselves that they're going to fight it because of the rebel personality and they want nothing to do with anything you tell them to do. But it doesn't mean they won't eventually get there, because they'll always do what we do. So this is the plan. It's over there. But what it does, it allows you to track down the bottom here their evenings, so they can learn how to shade in. You may have to model for them, but that's okay. Especially on a Sunday night, family huddle time. What's our week look like? And you model over 2 weeks or over a month, and then you have the other pages to reference where they start to model. They start to do it themselves. Where you give them the schedule, and they have to put in their schedule. Now, at a young age, they'll do that. By the time they get older, they may fight that process without some certain types of common understandings. Right? Anybody use this one? Anybody? No? A lot of schools are giving them out now, which is helpful. I think they're giving planners, and I think a lot of teachers now are getting into like the expectation of having kids take them out, which is great. That's nice to see. When one-to-one computing came out, schools got away from that, and then it's kind of gone back to be like, oh yeah, evidence-based around planners, they work. Okay, let's get them back in the classroom. And so there's been a shift back into that. I'm going to kind of, I feel like I'm being a little redundant because I keep talking about consistency, but all of that matters in helping our kids anchor their attention in time. What time is it? They don't care what time it is unless there's a reason. And if it's something they care about, yeah, they'll remember. But this is something you build over time to see the value in having consistent time. Really, the most important is, when are you starting? So on Sunday Night Huddle, when are you starting your homework this week? And make it a big deal. Like, make that starting time a big deal. And then you get dinner. Dinner before you start your homework. Or, you sort of kind of a family effort, right? All the TVs are off in the house. All the screens are off. Common areas set up. Body doubling. Did I have that in here? Fascinating. If you have a good relationship with your child to the point where you could be their body double, here's what it looks like. Common table, dining room maybe. They're sitting at one spot, their common spot, their stuff's there, and you're sitting on the other. Maybe the other side. You're doing something that mirrors what they're doing. Okay? Don't be cleaning the kitchen. Right? Don't be looking at your phone. Right? Just be mirroring what the productivity that they want to be achieving. You're just mirroring. Maybe you have the newspaper, right? Maybe you're writing letters, right? But that is a powerful, evidence-based, really process that can actually help our kids more than we can imagine. And a lot of adults do that with ADHD. A lot of success, they'll find themselves doing it without even realizing it years later. Like, oh, I always sat next to my spouse, and I'd get all of my work done in the evenings, and they were doing their thing, I was doing my thing. And like over time, I just realized it was bodybuilding. So it's a real positive intervention strategy that is worth talking about, especially if you do have that relationship where they would say, yeah, that would be helpful. Well, let's try it for a month or a week and see if it helped.
What's a wrap-up meeting?
So a wrap-up meeting would be like, if you were to set a time each day that we just check in. 6:30 is our check-in time. Whatever it is. Because when you set it out in the future, it becomes proactive. If you see your kids struggling, it becomes reactive, right? And so they pair that as a negative experience. So when you put it out there in time to say at this time every day, or in our Or Sunday night, we figure out when we're going to do our check-ins, because every day's different. But we have our check-ins. Cool. It just helps to build. Yes. Go back.
How do you deal with when you need to make exceptions to the homework process? Because you know your kid's just has had a really long day. You can tell that they're just spent and they're starting their homework and they're just getting frustrated. And you know the best thing is for them to actually take a break. They're not ready yet to do the work, and they're like, well, but if I don't do this now, then I can't do the next thing, and we're not gonna have TV time or what have you. And but they're just spent, and it's just gonna be emotionally, it's not the right time.
Right. What age?
11.
Okay. So they're conscientious.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Right. So we celebrate that.
Yeah.
Right. That's their strength.
It is. Yeah.
But they're not ready to handle it.
Right.
Right.
They don't want to disappoint, and they also don't want to
Absolutely.
miss out on what comes next.
Cool. And this is where parents need to make sure the school knows. Right.
School knows,
Perfect. And then you let things go.
but what if they won't let things go?
True, I know, but I think at that age, there's a part of them that will follow their parents eventually. Like, it's part of their leaning on our energy to figure out what to do. And maybe there's going to be a transition out of that. But if they want to hold on to that in their own space and eventually work through it, as long as mom or dad is like, hey, I love how conscientious you are. I give you permission to let it go. But you can decide. Right? I mean, so you're celebrating their strengths. You give them a chance. Yeah, they want to get their work done for tomorrow. They know what's going to happen, right? So you don't blame them, right? You don't, because I would say there's so many kids that are super conscientious, but the struggle is like, but they're not able to reach for what the expectations are at their age. Yeah, and that's probably not being overly helpful though in my recommendation.
No, it's really good. It just, for our particular situation, the praise and the support doesn't necessarily get us past that, but we'll keep trying.
So I'm going to get into, when the emotions are so high, there's no thinking, there's no
Yes,
planning, there's no
that's
frontal lobe activity, right?
That's where it's at.
So that's where we, especially for little kids, you're in fight or flight mode. There's nothing you can do except where the child is, and then shift, right? And meet them where they are. And the expectations, demands have to cease that are triggering that until there's a better plan in place, proactive plan. So I would say, what are the triggers? And tomorrow we start over, and we have a better plan. We just have to try new things, try a different approach. Notice you're getting stuck at this time of day. Notice you're getting stuck at this thing. And I have some strategies that get into. I'm going to move on to this. So I'm running. How much time do I have? Because I want to get to a couple of things. Oh my goodness! So I want to get to this piece right here. So this is problem-solving skills. Is what I love. The metacognitive process was what I think we as coaches spend and teachers don't get to spend enough time on. And as coaches spend a lot of time helping children learn how to solve problems. So when I'm stuck, I have a kid on my learning center, and his goal this semester, he just finished with a 14% in one of his classes. He had a really tough first semester, 14% in English. And so one of his challenges is he gets stuck, and hours will go by. He's a high school kid. And he doesn't have strategies to get unstuck. And so one of his strategies is to develop his own ways of getting unstuck. So that's what I'm talking about is he has to learn how to solve those problems because he's too old at this point to really lean on anybody, unless it's bodybuilding, of course. But he has to really own those problems. So as parents with younger kids, this process is phenomenal. It allows us to connect with our children unemotional, right? And help them see the problem. And ideally, work through a possible solution. So, I'm not, so this is, again, you have to, this is by Ross Green, if you've, Lives in the Balance, bless you. There is hours and hours of information on his website. It's all free. I'm giving you a snippet. Okay? He's the guy that wrote The Explosive Child back in like 1979. Right? So this stuff is amazing when your child is dysregulated and you have a chance to help. You can practice this. Especially when you could tell them what to do. This gets to the nagging piece. How do I break my own cycle of nagging? You do this. Because I might be excellent at nagging. I'm so good at nagging that I'm entering the world, and your kids can tell you, what are the 3 things I nag about them? Oh, I know, like your kids will fight over who gets to share the top 3 things you nag about. So all you're gonna do is change the script on your parenting approach to keep out of the driver's seat and engage my child in the problem-solving process. Okay? Here's the bad news. It's not going to work the first time. Right? Do it 100 times, and then let me know how it's going. Okay? What's up? You look stuck. I love that line. You can use it for most everything. Notice you're stuck. And then just that awkward silence of like, what is my dad talking about? But I notice you're stuck. What's up? I see that you're on your, whatever it is. Just observe and label it as an observation. Now, if you've done all the expectation stuff, if you've done all this stuff here, then what you're referencing is maybe their goals. Maybe you're referencing who they're trying to be as you notice they're stuck. I notice you want to be able to get your work done by a certain time, but I get a sense you look a little stuck in what you're doing. Whatever it is, whatever the expectation is, you just label it against that as an observation and then see, what can I do to help? So any questions about this? Because that's a couple of the strategies that are also really helpful. But what can come out of this is maybe something in writing, a strategy that they can try. Right? So tomorrow, this was a tough homework evening for you. I love how you persevered and tried your best. One of our strategies is I let your teacher know so that you can walk into class feeling like you're prepared. Sorry, I'm using your example a bit, but walk into class. That's a great example because it happens all the time. So you feel like you can walk into class feeling prepared and feeling like you can take on the day. Right? So that's our strategy to deal with those issues, challenges. Is that something because we've agreed to that? Whatever it is, talk it through when they're regulated, and then so you're helping them solve these big deal problems. And then you put in writing because maybe it's something that's meaningful that you want to capture for another day. Remember that strategy we wrote down to deal with these moments I'm stuck at 4:30 when I'm starting my homework? Oh yeah. Do you want to add to it? Because that strategy that we're trying doesn't seem to be working. Maybe we can come up with another one. So all this process is about facing the struggle and working through it. This is awesome. I have the book over there. It's a middle school textbook written by Lori Faith. And it's really all about building executive function skills in middle school, but the focus is on metacognition, which every middle school needs to build. It's just the problem-solving process. So you're talking about who I'm trying to be. What is my goal? What's my aim? What are the barriers? And what are my strategies? Now, you don't do this when they're struggling. You do this as a proactive conversation, maybe on a Sunday night. I noticed there's a few things that you were struggling with last week. Do you mind if we talk about that?
Yes.
Yes.
Leave me alone.
Maybe.
If you don't get in early enough.
I might say, can we make a plan for that? Because that was tough for me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go through that again. So can we make it? I will try to shift my language.
I think language is part of, I think, one of our important superpowers as parents is not ever saying too much, just saying just enough to connect, right? And some of us are so loquacious as a personality, that's our strength. And so we can kind of talk ourselves and be like, my kid never listens. Well, right? So it's always about less. Always, especially when there is dysregulation, it's always about less. And having a common language that you and your child can understand together. when you get stuck, what's helpful for me? What would you like me to do? It'd be really helpful if you pointed, like nonverbal cues are huge when you're stuck. What are some nonverbal cues? Like, do you want me to kind of direct you to your room? Because when you get stuck, it escalates, and then you start throwing things in the kitchen, whatever. It can get really messy, maybe behavior-wise. So you really want to talk out the strategies to get unstuck and move into a better direction, to the bedroom, where you can decompress. But this is a powerful process that just teaches this feedback loop, this cognitive-based process to see problems and potential solutions or strategies to overcome them. This is just another example, pros and cons. How are we doing? Run out,
No, sorry, it's just
huh? What it also allows you to do when you're talking at this level, you're able to help your children see strategies and more strategies. We're always talking strategies. Oh, Dad, I hate you're always talking strategies, but I also really like it because it's solving a lot of problems in my life. But we're talking strategies because I need to feel empowered. Self-efficacy is the word for it. I need to feel like I can go out into the world and solve my own problems. So, how do you do that? Well, one is you face the problem, and two is you learn how to develop strategies to overcome them. What happens if you don't learn that? You know what happens? I get 100 excuses, and I get really good at using them. Like, I forgot. I forgot is an excellent excuse, because I did. But it's a problem that I have yet to witness and acknowledge that there's interventions for, right? And these are just possible interventions that can be talked about, stress management techniques that can be talked about and used as strategies to manage stress when I do feel overwhelmed. Breathing techniques don't get enough attention. They are extremely helpful strategies for those students that have learned how to use them. And it just takes 6 seconds to go from feeling one way to feeling another. And so it's pretty powerful. But so I always put it in there as just an excellent strategy just to manage the flow of the day. So I've officially run over. Do I keep clicking? Because I have not. Just do Q&A. This is a piece about working memory, but it's at the end of my slides. But all of this taps into working memory. I do whole presentation on working memory, nonverbal, verbal, and it's awesome. I love talking about it because it also gets very little attention and just how important working memory is for self-regulation. We wake up in the morning. Your child has a full tank of gas. Okay, think of that as working memory. By the end of the day, that tank is empty. They use working memory to process, to plan, to organize emotions and information throughout the day. First period, second period, third period, fourth period, fifth period. All the new content, all the new assignments, and all the emotionality from that day gets filtered and organized through working memory. Or it doesn't. So when they come home with a tank empty, do you think they have room to try a strategy? No, they're done. Like, they need to reset. You can refuel it, and there's lots of strategies to refuel working memory, right? One of them is exercise, right? If you're a college kid, you can be talking about power naps, but there's ways to refuel working memory so that you can feel like you can finish your day. But for some kids that actually have working memory kind of deficits, which maybe a lot of people in this room, then that requires more strategies to manage working memory. Using a planner, checklist, things like that to keep information out of my mind where I can see it. Because I'm just going to forget and get emotional about it that I forgot. All right, so these processes, I haven't talked about late work. I did a whole training on late work. If your child is struggling to pass assignments in on time, it's very important that you do whatever you can to just let them move on. Okay? What ends up happening is we try our best to help our children catch up and keep up at the same time. It's not possible. We already know that because they're having a hard time keeping up. And then guidance department or someone gives permission for all this late work to get made up on the new semester. New quarter, brand new chance to start over. And they have all these assignments to make up from last quarter. I say you do whatever you can to move on from that. You have to for their sake. And if it's a middle school, it's not really a big deal. High school, it's a little bigger deal because you have grades to consider. Middle school, the grades don't go past them through middle school, so you shouldn't need to worry about that. As long as they're learning, for the most part, right? Then you don't have to worry about that. But that's a big deal. I talk a lot about it because we treat extending due dates as being therapeutic, and it's just not unless it's the rare kid that was out for 10 days and was doing most of the work anyways while they had the flu. So it wasn't really a big deal. But for some of our kids that do struggle with getting assignments passed on time, and they're asking for extensions, and I say all of that is bad because it just perpetuates a cycle that doesn't support learning, doesn't support life skills, and all these other things. So as long as people are conscientious about that as they make those decisions and understand that it's temporary maybe, right, or it's just a short intervention, but most of those kids will then continue to struggle to keep up, and the cycle will continue. So that's where I get on my soapbox to say, why do we as a system, I yell at the schools for this, why do we as a system perpetuate that when we know very few of those kids will be able to catch up and keep up at the same time? So it's a fear thing for many parents, I get it. But when you see the big picture of that, like, yeah, I get it, I can't allow my child to just stop where they are, right? Take the consequence from where they are and get a chance to start new, please, right? They deserve to start new. And that's what quarters are. Blessing of a quarter is you get to start new. Okay, so anyways, I touched on stuff. So Q&A, I'm willing to hang out as long as you guys would like me to.